The first shot did not sound like a rifle. It sounded like metal slipping from a tired hand and striking concrete. Soft, hollow, wrong. I was already on the rooftop when it happened. Body still against the cold grit, cheek pressed into dust, watching the alley below slowly swallow my team one careful step at a time. My breathing stayed slow and measured. My finger rested, waiting, steady. Beneath me, their formation tightened, rifles scanning dark windows that looked empty but felt watchful. Then one of ours faltered. No shout, no warning. He simply folded, and the silence that followed weighed heavier than any blast I had ever heard. From above, I could see what they could not. A shadow shifting where nothing should move. A glint of glass. Another rifle sliding into position, aimed straight at our medic. I shifted barely half an inch and let the world narrow to a single choice. Down there, no one knew I was watching. No one spoke my name. But if I failed, none of them would walk out of that alley alive. In that moment, I understood a truth every quiet soldier learns. Sometimes the line is held by someone no one ever sees. Subscribe to my channel, Lady Veteran Stories, for more real military stories, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. My name is Sergeant Natalie Cross, United States Army Reconnaissance Sniper, call sign Ghost. This happened in the year 2014, in a forgotten industrial stretch just outside the training boundaries near Fort Drum in northern New York. Most maps did not bother naming the place. To us, it was simply another exercise zone, another routine Overwatch assignment. But that morning, routine disappeared faster than anyone expected. What began as a controlled operation beside Alpha 7 reconnaissance element became the longest and most defining day of my career. I was never the loud soldier, never the one who filled space with words. My strength was patience. Years of training had taught me how to disappear into terrain, how to slow my breathing until time itself felt stretched, how to read wind at distance and intention without hesitation. Stillness was not just a skill, it was survival. My spotter that day was Specialist Hannah Doyle, calm, precise, and someone I trusted without question. We had trained side by side for 18 months, building a rhythm where even silence carried meaning. One whispered word from her could shift my entire focus, and one small movement from me told her everything she needed to know. Below us, Alpha 7 moved carefully through a narrow Irving corridor we called Ghost Alley. The place was nothing but fractured concrete, shattered glass, and broken walls leaning like tired bones. Windows stared empty but never felt harmless. Every corner carried uncertainty. Lieutenant Aaron Blake led the formation, steady and disciplined, always thinking 2 steps ahead. Close behind him was Sergeant Emma Voss, the unit's combat medic, quiet strength in human form, the kind of soldier who ran toward danger instead of away from it. Corporal Rachel Kim followed with scanning equipment, her focus always locked on invisible signals, listening for patterns most of us could not hear. Together they formed a unit built on trust and discipline. The mission was supposed to be simple overwatch during a live simulation. Watch, report, support if necessary. Nothing unusual. But something shifted before the first shot ever came. The radios began to carry a strange heaviness, not silence, but interference layered beneath normal communication. Rachel reported irregular signal echoes, movements that did not match any friendly units. Through my scope, thermal readings revealed faint motion across rooftops where no personnel were scheduled to be. The environment itself felt wrong, like the air held tension no one could explain. In combat, you learn to trust that feeling even when logic cannot confirm it. Instinct becomes its own kind of intelligence. I stayed still, scanning every rooftop line, every broken window, every reflection of light across cracked glass. I counted distances automatically, adjusted for the northern wind brushing across the corridor, measured angles in my mind as naturally as breathing. Below me, Alpha 7 advanced, unaware they were no longer alone. Somewhere in the shadows, unseen eyes were studying them, waiting with patience equal to mine. Then it happened. One of the soldiers below faltered mid-step. No warning, no shout, just a sudden collapse. The moment froze everything. Simulation ended instantly. Training had crossed into reality without permission. From that second forward, this was no longer an exercise. It was survival. After the first casualty, the alley changed. It no longer felt like empty concrete and broken walls. It felt awake, watching, breathing. Controlled fire came from more than one direction, precise and disciplined, far too coordinated to be random. Whoever was out there had studied the corridor, measured the angles, and waited for the perfect moment to strike. Through my scope, I saw the spacing between flashes, the rhythm of shooters who understood patience. This was not chaos. This was a planned trap. Hannah stayed close beside me, her voice low and steady as she layered thermal overlays across my view. Movement appeared along distant rooftops, faint but deliberate. My breathing remained calm, but the pressure grew slowly, tightening across my chest like invisible weight. I had two choices. I could fire early, reveal my position, and try to force them back. Or I could wait, study the pattern, and eliminate the real threat when it mattered most. Waiting felt wrong when my people were under fire. But patience often saves more lives than urgency. Below us, Sergeant Emma Voss moved her dust toward the fallen soldier, her hand steady despite rounds snapping against concrete nearby. She did not hesitate. That is who she was. Corporal Rachel Kim fought against failing signals, pushing through layers of static, searching for any pattern that could explain the attack. Lieutenant Aaron Blake scanned the corridor, searching for a path out, though every direction looked dangerous. Fear moved quietly through the unit, not panic, but the heavy awareness that survival was no longer guaranteed. Then I saw it. A second sniper shifting across a rooftop, slow and careful, aligning his rifle directly toward Emma. My moment of waiting ended. I exhaled slowly, corrected for wind drift, steadied the reticle, and fired once. The figure vanished behind fractured concrete. Below, the firing rhythm broke for a brief second. The pressure eased just enough for them to breathe. They would never know why. Some might call it luck, but there was no luck in that alley. The duel had begun. The enemy adjusted faster than most. Their counter-sniper began sweeping the rooftops, searching reflections, tracing shadow lines, hunting with the same patience I used against them. I pressed lower into the rough concrete, slowing my breathing until even the smallest movement felt loud. Every inch mattered now. One careless shift, one glint of light, and my position would be exposed. If that happened, Overwatch would collapse, and the unit below would lose the only advantage they had left. Through my scope, I saw Lieutenant Blake preparing a withdrawal toward the southern corridor. To him, it looked like the only open route. But from above, I noticed something wrong. The dust patterns were disturbed in unnatural ways. Small placements, too deliberate to ignore. Pressure triggers hidden and waiting. If they moved forward, the alley would erupt beneath their feet. I had to stop them, but I could not reveal myself. Carefully, I reached for a shard of broken mirror lying near the edge of the rooftop. Timing mattered. I angled it into the light and flashed a short, controlled signal. Not random. Intentional. Stop. Danger. Change direction. For a second, nothing happened. Then Blake froze, studying the reflection. He understood. Without hesitation, he redirected Alpha 7 toward the eastern breach, a narrow exit I had cleared earlier. One silent message saved lives, but the enemy pressure did not ease. Their shooters tightened angles, searching harder, firing closer. A round struck the wall just inches from Hannah's shoulder, exploding dust across her face and gear. She did not flinch. She did not panic. Calmly, she wiped her eye, whispered a wind correction, and marked a new target for me. That is what trust looks like in war. Not words, not promises, just steady hands when everything feels uncertain. Still, the weight of the moment grew heavier. We were no longer distant observers watching from safety. We were fully inside the fight, every decision carrying consequence, every breath measured against survival. A faint mechanical hum rose above the alley, almost lost beneath distant gunfire and shifting debris. I lifted my scope slightly and saw it hovering there, small, steady, watching. A drone, quiet, patient, scanning heat signatures across the broken corridor below. It carried no weapon, but it did not need one. Its purpose was simple: find human heat, turn movement into targets. If it located my position, Overwatch would vanish, and Alpha 7 would be exposed with nowhere left to move. I scanned the rooftop quickly, searching for anything that could disrupt its view. Near the edge, an old rusted pipe ran along the concrete, brittle with age. I struck it hard with the butt of my rifle. Metal cracked, then burst. Water sprayed across the rooftop, spreading into a thin, shimmering layer. Within seconds, steam began rising into the cold air, distorting thermal signatures and creating noise across the drone's sensors. It would not last long, but sometimes a few seconds are enough. Instead of aiming at the drone, I shifted focus beyond it, across the street toward a darkened window where faint movement flickered behind broken glass. The operator, calm breath in, slow breath out. The reticle steadied, and I fired once. The figure inside jerked backward, control device falling from his hands. Above, the drone faltered, drifting slightly, confused without guidance. Only then did I adjust and fire again, striking the drone itself. It dropped from the air, crashing lifeless into the alley below. Through my scope, I returned to Alpha 7. They were moving carefully toward the eastern breach, carrying their wounded, each step heavy but determined. Fear still clung to them, but so did discipline. At the rear, Private Lucas Reed held position, rifle trembling slightly in his grip as he scanned behind them. He was young, not yet shaped fully by combat, but he did not run. He held the line because others depended on him. I watched his back the entire time, tracking every shadow near his position until he finally crossed through the breach and disappeared into cover. Only then did I allow myself a single breath of relief. But danger was not finished. From the corner of my vision, I saw movement inside the stairwell behind us. The enemy had entered our building. Slow, deliberate steps climbed upward, weapons ready, searching. The distance that once separated hunter and hunted was closing fast. Long-range patience would no longer protect us. Hannah had already secured the escape rope along the far side of the rooftop. She checked the line, tested the anchor, then looked at me. No panic, no hesitation, just silent understanding. One of us had to go first. One of us had to stay. I made the choice without speaking. She descended, boots sliding quietly against the wall as she lowered herself toward the lower level where she could reestablish position and continue spotting. I remained above, shifting away from the rooftop edge and drawing my sidearm. The rifle that had carried me through distance would no longer serve here. Close quarters demanded something different. The first figure appeared at the stairwell entrance, weapon raised, scanning, time slowed, narrowing to movement and breath. I fired twice, controlled, precise. The figure collapsed before sound fully formed. Another followed immediately, rushing forward, desperate and aggressive. Again, 2 shots, steady hands, no wasted motion. Silence returned for only a moment. I listened. Footsteps paused below, cautious now. Whoever remained understood they were no longer advancing unopposed. Dust drifted slowly through dim light. My heartbeat stayed steady, not fast, not slow, just controlled. Fear existed, but it did not control me. Training held stronger. Across the alley, distant gunfire faded as Alpha 7 moved farther from the corridor. Their survival now depended on seconds I could still hold. A heavier step sounded on the stairwell. Slower, deliberate, the final pursuer. I shifted position, using broken concrete for cover, sidearm steady, breathing quiet. The rooftop felt smaller than before, the air thicker, the moment heavier. Distance had vanished. The unseen guardian had become part of the fight, and in that narrowing space between shadow and light, the line still had to be held. The first enemy stepped through the doorway without hesitation, weapon already raised, searching for movement. I did not give him time to think. I shifted from rifle to suppressed sidearm and fired twice, controlled and fast. He dropped where he stood. A second figure followed almost immediately, pushing forward with urgency. Again, 2 shots, steady hands, no wasted motion. The third moved slower, cautious now, understanding the danger waiting in the shadows. Close combat is nothing like distant shooting. It is not clean or quiet. It is raw and human. You hear boots scrape against concrete. Feel your own breath inside your chest. Smell dust, metal, and fear mixing in the air. Every second stretches, and every decision feels heavier. Behind me, Hannah secured the rope and began her descent, boots sliding carefully along the wall. Her voice came through calm and steady, barely louder than a breath, telling me she would reposition below and keep watch on the alley. I trusted her completely. We had trained too long together for doubt to exist. When she reached the lower level, I was alone on the rooftop landing, the silence returning in short, fragile pieces between distant gunfire. Then I heard it. A slower step rising from the stairwell. Measured, controlled, different from the others. This was not desperation, this was discipline. I shifted my stance, steadying my breathing, sidearm held firm but ready to move. The final enemy appeared through the broken doorway, and even before I saw his face, I knew who he was. The counter sniper, older, experienced, carrying the quiet anger of someone who had hunted for years. One of his hands showed dark stains where earlier fragments had torn into him, but pain had not slowed him. If anything, it had sharpened his resolve. He moved forward with purpose, determined to end the duel that had unfolded across rooftops and shadows. For a brief second, neither of us fired. We watched, measuring distance, searching for weakness. Then he lunged forward, rifle swinging upward, trying to close the gap before I could react. I stepped in, deflecting the barrel aside, and the two of us collided hard against the fractured concrete floor. The impact jarred through my shoulder, but training took over. There was no elegance, no precision like long-distance shooting, only instinct and survival. His strength pressed forward, desperate, refusing to fall. My sidearm slipped from my grip as we struggled, boots sliding across loose dust and broken stone. We grappled in silence except for harsh breathing and the scrape of gear against concrete. He tried to regain control of his weapon, pushing forward despite injury, his determination as strong as mine. For a moment, time narrowed to nothing but movement and resistance. Then my hand found something solid along the ground. A length of exposed steel rebar, jagged and cold. Without hesitation, I drove it forward before he could recover. The struggle ended suddenly. His weight fell away, and the rooftop returned to stillness. I did not move for several seconds. My breathing was the only sound left, slow and heavy in the quiet air. There was no victory in that moment, no sense of triumph. Only the realization that the fight above was over, but the mission below was not. I retrieved my sidearm, checked my surroundings, and moved carefully back toward the rooftop edge. The alley stretched beneath me, scarred and silent except for distant echoes of movement. Through the fading smoke and dust, I could still see parts of Alpha 7's path, still sense the fragile line between safety and danger. My role had not ended. Not yet. I steadied myself once more, slowing my breath, listening to the battlefield. Because even when the fighting grows quiet, a soldier learns never to assume the danger is past. From a lower rooftop across the alley, Hannah's voice returned through the radio, calm and steady, guiding me once more. She had repositioned perfectly, her scope now covering the open ground where Alpha 7 had taken shelter inside a shattered retail structure. Broken walls and twisted metal gave them partial cover, but not enough to withstand another coordinated assault. Dust drifted slowly through fading light, and the battlefield felt suspended between danger and silence. Hannah marked movement first. Two figures advancing from the west, low and careful. I adjusted, steadied my breathing, and fired. One dropped instantly. The second tried to retreat but fell before reaching cover. Moments later, she whispered again. Machine gun team, approaching from the south. I shifted angle, calculated distance, and fired once more. The weapon fell silent before it could roar. The pressure began to ease, but it did not disappear. Battles rarely end all at once. They fade piece by piece. Then came the final threat. A rocket operator moving through rubble, preparing to fire toward the structure where Alpha 7 held position. If he launched, the fragile shelter would collapse. Hannah's voice tightened slightly, marking his exact location. I slowed my breathing, blocking out everything except the narrow space inside my scope. One shot. The figure staggered, then fell, the launcher slipping from his grasp into the dust. Silence followed, deeper than before. No more movement. No more advancing shadows. For the first time since the first shot in the alley, the battlefield stopped pressing forward. The constant weight that had sat on my chest began to lift, replaced not with relief, but with exhaustion and quiet disbelief. Sometimes survival feels unreal, like waking from something heavy and dark. Later, Private Lucas Reed told me something I would never forget. He said that while they moved through the corridor, he felt as if something unseen was guiding them, clearing danger just before it reached them. He never saw me, never heard my rifle clearly, but he knew someone was there. That is the truth of Overwatch. When it is done right, it feels invisible. The protection is real, but the protector remains unseen. As the sun lowered toward the horizon, the steady thunder of helicopter blades rolled across the broken buildings. Dust lifted into the air as extraction arrived, dark shape descending into the fading light. Alpha 7 moved quickly, carrying their wounded formation tight despite exhaustion. One by one they boarded, boots striking metal, rifles still scanning even as safety came closer. Discipline does not fade easily. Lieutenant Aaron Blake was the last to step inside. Before boarding, he paused and looked back across the ruined corridor, eyes searching rooftops and shadows. When he reached the aircraft, he asked the crew chief a simple question: who provided sniper support? The answer came back clear: no sniper unit assigned, no additional overwatch recorded. According to official logs, Alpha 7 had survived alone. The helicopter lifted, carrying them away from Ghost Alley, leaving only silence and dust behind. But soldiers know truth when they feel it. After the mission, the silence felt heavier than the fighting. Gunfire fades quickly, but memory does not. In the temporary aid station, Sergeant Emma Voss sat with her sleeves rolled, quietly cleaning dried blood from her hands and gear. Her movements were slow but steady, the way someone works when exhaustion presses deep into the bones. She had carried wounded men through smoke and fear without hesitation, and now that the danger had passed, the weight of what she held together began to settle. Across from her, Corporal Rachel Kim leaned over damaged signal equipment, replaying fragments of interference and broken transmissions, trying to understand how close everything had come to failing. She spoke little, but her focus never drifted. Even in stillness, she was searching for patterns, for meaning in the chaos they had survived. Private Lucas Reed sat nearby, rifle resting across his knees. Earlier, his hands had trembled so hard he could barely steady his aim. Now they were still, not relaxed, not careless, just steady. Fear had not vanished from him. It had changed shape, hardened into something quieter, stronger. That is what battle often does. It does not remove fear, it reshapes it into awareness. I stayed apart from them. A few streets away stood a small abandoned church, its windows cracked, its walls worn by time and neglect. I stepped inside and found a place near the broken altar where dust lay thick across the floor. There, in the quiet, I sat and began cleaning my rifle. Barrel, bolt, chamber, each movement slow and deliberate, the way I had done after every mission. There was no celebration, no sense of victory, only reflection. Some battles leave marks no one else can see, marks carried quietly long after the noise fades. As I worked, my mind replayed the day in fragments: the first fall in the alley, the flash of danger in the southern corridor, the moment the drone hovered above us, the close fight on the rooftop, each decision measured in seconds, each outcome balanced on thin lines between life and loss. I did not think about the shots themselves. I thought about the people below, the ones who walked away breathing. That was always the measure of success. Not how the fight was won, but who survived it. Days later, when reports moved through command channels, Colonel Margaret Hayes reviewed the classified file in silence. She studied ballistic patterns, signal disruptions, and the unexplained support that had altered the outcome of the engagement. At the end of the report, she left only one written line: do not pursue identification. Some guardians serve best unseen. When those words reached me, I felt no surprise. Recognition had never been the mission. Applause was never the purpose. The work of a soldier is not to be seen. It is to protect, to endure, to hold the line when no one else can. That understanding stayed with me, quiet and steady, long after the battlefield fell silent. Years have passed since Ghost Alley, yet the silence from that day has never truly left me. I still remember the space between each shot, the quiet weight of knowing that lives depended on decisions measured in inches and seconds. War is not always noise and fire. Sometimes it is still, patient, and heavy with responsibility that settles deep inside you long after the moment is gone. I cannot recall every round that left my rifle, but I remember Sergeant Emma Voss refusing to let a wounded soldier slip away, even when exhaustion pressed against her. I remember Corporal Rachel Kim fighting through broken signals, searching for clarity when confusion surrounded us. I remember Specialist Hannah Doyle's calm voice guiding me when uncertainty tried to take hold. And most of all, I remember watching Alpha 7 walk out alive, never knowing how close the line came to breaking. People often imagine heroes standing in the open, seen and celebrated. Sometimes that is true, but sometimes they remain unseen, lying still in dust and shadow, doing the quiet work that keeps others breathing. That day, I was not fearless. I was simply a soldier doing her duty, one decision at a time. Some stories never reach official records. They live in memory, in silence, in the shared understanding of those who were there. Ghost Alley taught me that holding the line does not require recognition. It requires commitment, steady and unwavering. Subscribe to my channel, Lady Veteran Stories, for more real military stories, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from.